My name is Peter Parfitt. Welcome to the New Bit Workshop. This is the Festool KS120EB miter saw, commonly known as the Kapex. Now I've had this one for about 3 years. In fact, it was my very first Festool purchase. I bought it from Axminster Power Tools here in the UK. I've had a number of people ask me if I would tell you a little bit about this saw, so today I'm going to do just that. Now 3 years ago, when I was working out what saw would replace my old radial arm saw, I agonised for ages. I'd never bought any Festool kit before and I didn't know what I needed. So I looked at every single miter saw that I could afford, and this is why I chose this machine. First of all, it's got a very sturdy, stiff chassis. It's made of cast aluminium, so it's not that heavy at all. It's got these twin columns here, which makes the movement of the blade and the motor mechanism very smooth and very accurate. Its dust collection capability is second to none, and I haven't seen anybody prove that there's another saw on the market that has better dust collection than this one. Now I really like the safety features of this machine, and there are two controls here and here to get the machine running. There's an on-off switch here, and there's a switch guard here. Now some people find this tricky to start with, but once you've tried it a few times you'll find it's second nature. So you can't move when the saw's up, you can't move it at all until you press the on-off switch. But pressing the on-off switch doesn't start the machine. You can then lower it down to where you want to start the action. You then have to press the switch lock at the top here with your thumb, which then allows you to squeeze the on-off switch all the way so that the motor starts. And then when you release, the blade guard comes down, protecting the operator from the blade. But notice that the blade stops very quickly. And that's it. Excellent. I'll just take you through some of the controls that you can see from this angle. Here you have the on-off switch for the lasers. Here you have the speed control. Speed is adjustable from 1400 up to 3400 RPM. At the back here is the vertical miter lock, which locks the position either left or right of the vertical. You have the coarse control knob here for vertical mitering. More of these later. There is the trenching control here. More of this later. There is a lock for the carriage, and it can be locked anywhere, and in the rear position it can be locked for transport. And there's another safety lock here which can hold everything down in that position. Again, it's used for transportation as well, to keep everything rigid. And the next thing I really like are these twin lasers, one for the left hand edge and one for the right hand edge of the blade. So you're going to be able to do some pretty accurate cuts with those lasers set up properly. And just look at the angles you can get on this machine. Going this way, you can go all the way up to 60 degrees, and this way, all the way up to 50 degrees. And that's an astonishing range for a miter saw. There are detents at the usual places, 0, 30, 45 and so on, and you can lock the whole thing even when it's not in a detent by pushing down on this knob here, and that's it, locked. To move it, you raise that up, press this button, and that overcomes the detent action. There it is, move it. And when you're at the angle you want, lock it off. Now in order to do miter cuts in this plane here, the first thing we do to allow these sort of miter cuts is to release the clamping knob at the back here. And then you see this green knob, this can be put into 3 positions. 0 to 45 degrees, plus or minus 45 degrees, so it can go either way, and plus or minus 47 degrees, so it can go even further. So I've just moved the saw body down so it's out of your line of view, and I've lifted this locking lever. I'm going to set this to the plus or minus 45 position, and now you can see that this head assembly will move left to right. So I use the adjustment knob here to get it into exactly the position I want, and when it's there I close the clamping feature at the back, and that's it, locked in position, ready to do a cut. To get it back to the 0 degrees, the upright position, loosen the clamp, turn the knob at the back to the 0 to 45 position, and then move it, and there is a detent which you can feel. Once it's in that detent for 0 degrees, lock it off, and you're back to normal sawing. Now behind the blade of the saw is this dust catcher arrangement. I'm going to take it off now. It comes off very simply, and it consists of 2 parts. There's the rubber shroud here, which does all the work of the dust catching, but there's a plastic clip arrangement which goes around the outside of the rubber. And it's this plastic clip that holds this in place. It's got a pair of lugs, one here and one there, and those fit into a pair of holes on either side of the rubber shroud. So I'll just pop that back in. Now I've heard of a couple of people who've thought they've had some problems with the dust collection on their Kapex, and it's been simply because this part has not been fitted properly. Now if you look under here, there's a little notch here on this side, there's one on the other side as well, and that is to take the notch which is on the inner side of this plastic clip. So I'm going to put it back in, and it should click in to those notches, one on either side, and that's it, properly in position. And before I put the saw into the mitre station, I'm just going to show you this rear cable tidy, and if you're using the machine on site and you then want to put it back in your van or whatever, then there's a cable tidy which really does the job. And here is the hex key which is used for blade changing. We'll cover that in a minute. Now when it comes to putting the Kapex on some form of working platform, there are a whole bunch of options. Festool provides several of these. One is a folding bench arrangement which also acts as a trolley for the machine if you're carrying it to and from a site. Another is a workbench which is similar to the folding MFT3, and of course then you can choose your own solution. Now I've gone for my own solution, and the only design feature you need to be aware of at this point is that the height of these outrigger pieces and the part where the Kapex sits, the difference is 110 millimeters. I will be building a new one of these at a later point, and I'll make a video of that. That will be later in the year. Now it's very important that you fix the Kapex down to whatever platform you're using, and so I've made up my own arrangements using some screw inserts screwed into the top here, and then I'm just going to use a few of these machine screws to then firmly hold the Kapex in position. And once I've got the 4 of these screws in, then this is good to go. Now there are several little things that you can do to improve your Kapex experience, and both of mine, which I'm going to suggest to you now, are to do with zero clearance inserts, and this is all about producing chip-free cuts when you're using the machine. And the first one is this insert which goes here instead of these sacrificial plastic pieces. Now this one I've had in use before, hence it's already got the kerf mark of the saw. But if you were making one of these, you would start with a piece of wood of the appropriate size, and then you would insert it in here, screw it down, and then using the saw blade you would make that kerf mark. So therefore when you're then cutting wood, you won't get any chip out on the underside. So we'll just remove these sacrificial plastic pieces which come with the machine. And there we have that piece installed, and that's now ready to go. Next I'm going to put some sacrificial pieces on these rear fences, and the reason for doing that is that these will extend beyond the metal end of the fence, and so I can create a zero clearance effect at the back, which again will stop the chip out as the saw blade goes through the back end of a piece of wood. And these are fitted very simply. I've made these pieces of wood up with some holes, and these are counterboard, and I've put the screw through and a washer on, and then I've got some of these knobs which I'm using, which happen to be the right size, but you could use just ordinary nuts if you wished. You need to note, of course, that the piece is larger than the rear fence, both here where we have the sacrificial bit, but also underneath here. And you can see it going into place now, and I can now lock that in the appropriate position, like so. So that's that done, and now I've got my various sacrificial pieces in place. Now, when I bought my machine, supplied as standard is this workpiece clamp, and it will fit on either side of the machine. And it fits into a hole at the back here, and similar position on the other side, and you put it in facing away from you, and then turn it round like so. And then you can push this down and then lock it off like that, and that holds a piece of wood firmly in place. Now, as an optional extra, I've bought a pair of these crown moulding extensions, and they fit one on either side, and there's a V-groove section here which it fits into very simply. And the original purpose of this design is to give you an ability to hold crown moulding in place, and this would be slid on here, and your crown moulding would go up against the rear fence, and the other part of the crown moulding would be held against this adjustable piece here. But I don't use that. I use this for two reasons. One is to extend the width of the platform, but also, and this is for me just a little bit more important, it gives me some additional clamping options because there's a T-slot here which takes all of the Festool clamps, and I find that particularly useful because if you're doing some awkward pieces of wood where you might want to clamp both sides of it before you do a cut, then this is the simple solution. And the next thing to consider is dust collection, and I'm using a 36mm hose connected to the dust port on the machine. You could use a 27mm hose, but 36mm is far more efficient. And the other end of it goes to my CT26, which is just down here. And I've plugged the cable from the Kapex into the port on the CT26.